All right. Today's guest, Iliana Oris Valiente, is managing director and the head of innovation centers for the Americas at Accenture. She's also a CPA that does amazing innovation work as an investor, a a communicator of how to get family offices into the investment and venture community, a board member, advisor of startups. Iliana, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I think let's start with the story behind your innovation. I think you discovered blockchain before most people knew what that was or why it was relevant back at Deloitte, build a business around that. Tell us about what can fascinate you with old things new, and how do you bring that in very established, very relatively conservative organizations like Deloitte or Accenture?
hmm I've always been this square peg in a round hole, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. And I've always asked a whole lot of questions, which may have been to the annoyance of the people that I worked with early on in my career. But thankfully, there were many who nurtured that
Mm-hmm.
curiosity, and that lifelong spark has never left. And so for me, I'm always questioning just because things are in a particular way today.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean that this is how it's going to be tomorrow or
Mm-hmm.
next month or next year? And the answer is inevitably nope, no guarantees. And so that's step one, like endlessly curious.
Mm-hmm.
Step two, around me in particular, is I tend to be a very multidisciplinary, multi hyphenate, if you will. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a chartered accountant,
Mm-hmm.
but when I remember stumbling into the world of blockchain back in the day, I thought to myself, wait a second, these are just ledgers. They're
Right.
distributed ledgers. I'm an accountant by training. I think about ledgers. Why don't I apply that world into this world, which is very, very foreign at the time. And so I've just continued that curious streak and the connecting of the dots from different disciplines that don't often talk to each other streak. And today I sit at the intersection of emerging tech trends, societal trends, capital investment trends, and I love to stitch all those things together.
Yeah, I see it. And I love your LinkedIn headline. We were just saying is that building a future humans want to live in, which is really aligned with many themes that we're working on, what our audience loves, which is building a future where people want to engage with complex, important ideas. And so tell us, how do you help humanize this innovation that is, for many people, like, okay, it's ledger, it's very difficult, I can't, I am not a CPA, like, how you bring it to life? Is it always value? Is it storytelling? Is it like show not tell, with like live demos? What have you learned in building innovation infrastructure at Accenture to bring complexity in and make it accessible inside large organizations?
At the core of my work and the work of my teams at Accenture is around human centric design. There's a
Mm-hmm.
human in every process, whether you're talking about how a company revamps its products to better appeal to their end customers, or
Mm-hmm.
whether you're talking about a company that's redesigning their workflows internally, where the
Mm-hmm.
end user is really the employee. You
Mm-hmm.
would be surprised by the number of times that I've walked into rooms with clients who are undertaking a big technology transformation program. And,
Mm-hmm.
they're spending tens of millions of dollars. And when I ask, okay, so what's the change management plan? And oh, you're going to roll out this product that now is going to be used by every single one of your frontline employees. What was the feedback like when you were running your sprints to inform the product roadmaps? And it's crickets. And
The
people look
sprints?
at
What's
me
a sprint? They're asking what's a
like,
sprint?
what? You mean inputs
Is
from
it agile?
our you want inputs from our employees? I'm like, well, yeah, the frontline people that are going to have to use this widget that you're spending a lot of time and money designing. Has anyone asked, does this widget
Yeah.
actually work for you? Does this workflow work for you? And I may as well be speaking a foreign language. And so when we look at technology adoption in
Mm.
companies, oftentimes they go sideways because you can throw a bunch of tech at people, you can throw money at the problem, but if you haven't considered the needs of the end users and stakeholders, you're
Yeah.
not setting yourself up for a successful type of outcome. And so I keep that front and centered for my overall life as I,
Mhm.
strive to build a future world that humans want to live in, because I fundamentally believe that we have a lot of power and we
Mm.
have a lot of input
Mm.
around what that future world looks like. It's not just coming at us, especially at a senior executive leadership level. We can shape it. We just have to be really intentional about that
Mm.
shaping.
And what's preventing most organizations at doing this really well? I mean, I'll throw out a couple of hypotheses and
Mhm.
maybe you could guide us. So one thing is when you're obviously a very large organization, you're more inward oriented, right? Like there's you have to report, there's promotion cycles internally, so there's that whole dimension where you think like that. Then the second is your role, right? If you're technology person, you think technology is what matters, and so it just you're doing great at what you're good at, and you're siloed because you're a large organization, so you don't have that direct access to customer experience. um and then maybe there is not as many people that are trained in this sort of faster feedback loops, right? Because historically in the large organizations, you do technology often started with internal projects, and so it was not necessarily, had the DNA of customer centricity outside of maybe a digital team, which was typically not involved in a lot of these things. So those are some hypotheses. What does any of them ring true? And is there some other themes or core themes that kind of you would say are patterns that companies struggle with?
I would say that in a lot of organizations, this idea of being human centric does not come organically. It's
Mm.
not something that has historically been rewarded or prioritized, and for all the reasons that you've listed. And so oftentimes my teams will get brought in to essentially facilitate a dialogue with the CTO and the technology functions and the business functions to get to alignment
Mm.
around what is the vision, what is it that
Mm.
we're driving towards, and how do we make sure that we're not talking past each other, but that we're
Right.
actually speaking with each other. I have made the quip before that sometimes I feel as though I run teams of corporate therapists, and it doesn't feel like it's
Tell
rocket
me
science.
more. Tell me more. Lean back.
It's like, please grab a seat on my couch.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what's keeping you up
Yeah.
at night
Yeah.
and what are all the dynamics inside of
Yeah.
your organization that
Yeah.
we need to
Imagine you're on
address.
your deathbed and what would this project look like?
We don't have to fast forward that far.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of it just boils down to that stakeholder alignment, and that's a big component. But when you do design thinking and when you follow the principles of human centered design, that's actually where the best breakthroughs and innovations happen. We've run multi-week, multi-month design sprints with
Mhm.
clients, incorporating firsthand research, market
Mhm.
research, and looking at the trends in technology and the trends in society and synthesizing all of that and bringing all the key stakeholders along for a journey with a handful of working sessions in between. And the feedback we get from the C suite execs is wow, we've accomplished more in this, 8 hour workshop.
Mhm.
And the prior and the prior few weeks of work than we would have done on our own in over a year of trying to figure this stuff out. So, yeah, I'm a very big proponent of design and design thinking as a methodology.
So let's kind of connect design centric thinking and customer centricity, because
Mhm.
one of our guests, investors, friends of the pod and the company is Peter Fader, a Wharton professor who's invented customer lifetime value formula calculation, has written books on customer centricity for many, many years, right? And has
Mhm.
taught that as executive. And then we have obviously Amazon, the world's most customer centric company. All of us are consumers of that. We kind of feel some of the benefits of what they're doing just as
Mhm.
consumers. And so where's this disconnect be, between us in enterprise as consumers, knowing what great customer experience is, and then not taking the step and saying, how can we realize it in our life, and needing you, for example, as your team to bring that voice in. Like where's like some sort of, philosophically speaking, some sort of like Plato's cave that we're sitting in, or we're just seeing shades of what we think the customers want, and so we assume that that's good enough, and then we just don't get out, because in theory, like everybody wants to say, well, I designed for the customers, right? Like who doesn't want to be the next Jeff Bezos as a CEO, right, in America? So I don't know, or guide me on this sort of the blinders that people have.
So I don't know why it's the case, but I certainly know that it is the case that we have one set of experiences as a consumer in our personal lives and a
Mm-hmm.
whole other set of experiences as employees or as those interacting with companies.
Yeah.
And I've used this example before to say, listen, with Uber, I know exactly where my car is
Mm-hmm.
down to the 50-foot marker.
Right. Right.
But if I renew a passport, for instance, I might not know if that passport is going to arrive next month, 2 months from now, three
Mm-hmm.
months from now. There's
Mm-hmm.
zero visibility. But
Mm-hmm.
our expectations, based on our interactions with the private sector,
Mm-hmm.
are starting to bleed into our expectations of our interactions with governments and our expectations when we interact with corporate systems as an employee or as a customer. Because if it's sleek and efficient and user
Mm-hmm.
centric over here and clunky and kludgy over there, it does not work. And so this is why a lot of organizations have been undertaking their experience transformation journeys to
Mm-hmm.
say, how do we lift the bar and surprise and delight our customers and our employees?
So it starts with asking these sort of right question and creating an environment where you could dig into them. Well, that kind of connects me to the other topic that's really interesting, right? So startup world, chaos, changing every time, and then you're in an organization that I personally admire. I've had, as I was telling you earlier, like great experience going through Accenture's innovation labs, and kind of having Accenture become our first promoter and partner and customer for what is now, through several iterations, is Relayto AI. So I've seen this, but like many people would assume that these worlds don't coexist particularly well. And are you the unicorn that bridges it all together, just like was the CPA and innovation, or what? Like, is there something special brewing at Accenture as well that attracts people like you to join the organization and drive this type of innovation connections between startups and corporates?
Yeah, so I view myself as a translator between different
Mm,
worlds. I actually
mm,
have a Substack called
mm,
Translations.
mm.
I speak multiple languages that I'm often
Do
translating
you speak
between.
innovation?
And I also speak innovation. Exactly. But all jokes
You speak,
aside,
yeah.
I spend a lot of my time translating between the startup world, the corporate world, and the investor
The investor world,
world.
yes.
And they're actually overlapping Venn diagram type circles. And so oftentimes I'll take the insights from the smaller startups to say, hey, there's this thing brewing
Mm-hmm.
on the fringes. We should be paying attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring some of those insights where relevant to the big Fortune 500 companies at the board level to say, hey, have you seen the startup?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen this idea? If not, would you be open to me brokering a conversation and actually putting the two of you into the same room and trying to prevent the issue? You know, the expression of the elephant accidentally stepping on the little mouse. And that's oftentimes what happens with corporates and startups. So
Is
I
that like,
try.
are you referring to a 2-year pilot? Is that
Yes, a 2 year unpaid pilot. Correct. And we want to avoid those because that's very difficult.
But
And
6 months to sign an NDA before that?
yes, it's too high stakes for a startup to get entangled. And so I often act as that translator. For instance, just yesterday I was at the Creative Destruction Lab, the
Mhm.
incubator that started at University of Toronto, but now has, I think, 14 or 15 sites around the world attached to some of the most prestigious universities. And they have startups that come in from all over the world.
Yeah,
Yesterday, we were doing a stream focused on AI and specifically AI for sciences.
yeah.
So how AI is changing R&D in pharma, for instance, or in material science or human computer interface and robotics and diagnostics and the rest of that. And so I'm able to take insights from that and the actual companies and then directly connect them with the large corporates. And then I also play a translation layer with the capital groups.
Mm-hmm.
So a
So
lot
wait,
of
hold on. Let me get this straight before we get to
yeah.
capital. So are you able to take a big pharma and make it roll out innovation within 2 months with a startup, or you're like you still operate on Earth and like is there like what's the biggest success stories where you get these? And I know this because we operate in regulated world where for very good reasons the processes around excellence and quality in pharma as an example are extremely elaborate, and so that does slow things down. Is that still a reality that you're just trying to kind of bridge a little bit, better, or are you able to have some breakthroughs where companies really innovate very fast in some areas that normally are so hard for that particular industry, as an example?
So it's a combination of both. I mean,
Yeah,
you're not going to change your regulatory process. The
yeah,
regulatory process exists, but
yeah.
you can at a minimum introduce a concept to a senior C-suite executive that changes their perspective around how they approach new product development, for instance. And sometimes it means I'm advising a startup to say, I know this sounds exciting. However, I would really not recommend barking up
Yeah,
that tree because you are going to spend the next 6 months or eight
yeah,
months trying to
yeah,
get this pilot up and off the ground.
yeah,
And you may or may not have enough runway
yeah,
to do that. Some startups can afford to do that, other startups can't.
yeah.
And even being able to have that really candid conversation between the two ends up being quite valuable. But if
Mm-hmm.
you look at Accenture and how we've structured our ventures program, for instance, we
Mm-hmm.
have our spotlight program. So when we invest in companies off of the Accenture balance sheet, we don't just write a check. We're writing a check and we become a strategic partner to those
Mm-hmm.
organizations to help them scale. I'll give you an example. One would be Sanctuary AI.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the field of humanoid robotics.
Mm-hmm.
Accenture is one of the investors there, and they're working with companies in the retail space who are
Mm-hmm.
looking at packaging and warehouse and the rest of it. We have a lot of relationships there, and so oftentimes we'll work with our clients and with any of the portfolio companies that are in our ecosystem to broker
To
those
connect those.
relationships and
Mm-hmm.
to do the pilots and get them to scale.
Amazing. Well, so to get back, so we've got two pieces talking to each other, and then you're also an LP whisperer, I understand, and family office whisperer. So tell us about that part.
Yes, I mean, I'm an investor, angel VC, and in a couple of VC funds as well as an investor, LP, and an advisor. And so I spent a lot of time in that ecosystem, obviously connecting with the startups and any of the portfolio companies that exist in that fund, helping to leverage my corporate connections to
Mm-hmm.
help them scale. And increasingly over the last year or so, I've gotten a lot of questions from all of my family office next gen friends around investing in venture capital as an asset class. And the questions range the gamut. And finally, I asked, I was like, why is it that you are asking me these questions? And they said, well, yes, we have a lot of advisors for our family office, but our advisors tend to be much older. They're not tech native and
Mm,
they can't explain complex
And they
subjects
don't
in
understand
plain
technology.
English.
Or
They don't
something.
understand the technology, and they're like, well, you're young and you're with it and you're in these circles. And so I've essentially become the informal on-ramp for family offices who want to get more involved in investing in the frontier, which I think is amazing because
Mhm.
those with capital have a responsibility to deploy that capital
Yeah.
in order to play a part in building a future world that humans want to live in. And when I look at, geographically speaking, Canada, for
Mhm.
instance, or in Europe, very little of the capital that's sitting in family office pools is actually ever deployed
Mm.
into VC and early stage investing.
Mm.
To them, it's foreign. And so people don't usually invest in things that are foreign and that they don't understand. But the argument I'm making is, hey, you actually have a moral obligation if you can invest to invest, because those early stage startups are the ones who are going to become the scale ups, and the
Mm.
scale ups are the ones who are going to employ more and more Canadians, more and more Europeans. And if you want to
Mm.
drive innovation in your region, in your country, and you
Yeah.
have the capital, well, if you're not deploying the capital, who exactly is backing those companies? It's not a
Mm.
bank, it's not the
Mm.
traditional private equity shops. It has to be at that individual level as well.
So you're saving Canada and EU and maybe UK from economic irrelevance. Is that sort of that's a minor mission on top of everything else? Uh,
I'm
so but
trying to play
uh,
my part.
well, so let's just for the fun of those that are curious about how that world works. I think one of the interesting things was an investor model is that they are constrained increasingly by the windows of innovation, and unless you're like you know blow away AI story that is already exploding, like many innovations like deep tech, deep science that you're referring to take time to get to market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, it does feel like a family office sometimes is a better home because they have a longer term investment horizon, and they're maybe not as transactional for lack or like the for lack of a better word, they may be more aligned with the mission, like you were saying, because you're drawing them in a mission, whereas the mission of an average investor, despite whatever they would claim if they have a portfolio strategies to typically kind of return and raise the next fund, right? Like, whereas it feels like family offices have a slightly longer term perspective. Am I getting this right, or am
You
I
are, you are.
blaming
And so
VCs for something that they haven't earned?
so we're not blaming VCs here,
Yeah,
but what I often tell family offices is that their timelines work really well with the
yeah.
VC outcomes as well. It takes now on average 11 to 12 years for a company to go IPO. And
Mm,
that window has doubled in the last decade or so. So it's taking a lot longer for companies
yeah,
to have exits. And family offices don't have quarterly reporting that they
yeah.
need to do. They tend to have the ability to invest against areas that are of passion and interest and alignment with their own investment thesis. And they have patient capital. And
Yeah.
patient capital is exactly what is needed in domains like deep science, where you're not churning out a quick direct to consumer software as a
Yeah.
service type of a play and calling it a day. And when I explain it in those terms, I can see the light bulb going off inside of the family office heads. And they're like, oh,
Oh,
okay, this makes a lot of sense.
okay. So what are VCs in your view, right? Like you're an investor, you see family office in their value add, you see obviously strategic investors like Accenture. And you invest in some VCs. Where do you choose to invest, and where do you see the VCs are not getting something, right? Like they're either too short term oriented or too too much following the trend and not digging in deeply enough into truly true contrarian bets. Like what kind of gives you red flags and saying, hey, you'd be a great LP for this fund but not that fund, and like that because it sort of sounds like that's sometimes also a role that you play. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, without naming names, right? Like what are some offenses that you see that maybe incentives are not aligned for either startups or LPs appropriately.
What I'll say is that, yes, I do tend to do a lot of connecting across the deal flow that I see and the investors. And one of the observations, and this is actually documented in a recent research report that I co-authored with a VC fund of funds, Allocator One, that I
Mm-hmm.
happen to be affiliated with, and that research report reviewed the entire funding landscape over the past couple of years. And the key headlines are that more than 53% of all VC funding in this past year has flown into AI powered companies
Mm.
at the expense of everything else that's also equally important, like all the infrastructure plays that are required, not just for AI, but just to keep the economy and the world
Mm-hmm.
moving. And out of the VC money, most of the money that went into VCs, rather, went into mega established funds.
Mm.
And of the checks that those funds wrote, they went disproportionately into large, mega investment deals.
Got it.
And so you can see heavy, 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 heavy concentration of where the money is flowing. And all of the other sectors are effectively being starved for capital. So, as an investor, if you're
Then some
looking
sort of weird tree was like tiny little,
exactly.
door, and then
Exactly. You
and
could
it's
just see
shaking in the
the
wind.
flow. You could see the
Yeah,
flow of capital essentially ending up in one little segment
yeah, yeah,
of the
yeah,
market. And
yeah.
as an investor, it's best to not go where the crowd is going. It's
Mm.
best to go where there's ample opportunity, ample upside, and not nearly enough competition. And so, this entire research report actually is titled the Alpha Report because
Yeah.
it's designed to help investors find those contrarian, underlooked, but high potential areas. I'll give you a really simple example.
Mm.
Fintech as a category. If you look at fintech in the US, it is an overweighted sector. There's plenty of money flowing there. There are plenty of startups. Arguably, we don't need yet another fintech buy now, pay later type of a product. But if you look at fintech in Latin America, there's a
Mm.
ton of upside and potential there, but you don't have nearly as much capital in that region. So the same, call it $1 million invested in a fintech in North America is not going to get you nearly as far as that same $1 million invested in a fintech in LATAM. And conversely, the report highlights some of the other geographical corridors where there's high upside, very low investor appetite. And it's essentially a roadmap for contrarian thinking. So that's at the domain type level.
Mm-hmm.
The other area that I'm looking at as part of my own personal thesis is when I'm looking at VC fund managers, I fall into the camp of people who believes in backing emerging VC fund managers,
Mm.
meaning not the mega fund that's been in existence for the last 20 years, but the smaller niche specialist fund that has been launched by someone who has deep, deep, deep
Right.
expertise in a particular domain and has an investment thesis that is organic to them and
To
who
them,
they
and they're
are
not just
as
fooling the crowd. They didn't
they're not
discover
following the crowd.
blockchain and became Web3, or they were
Correct.
Web3 yesterday. Now they're AI.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's
So there's a
multiple of
fund
that.
called Common Magic, founded by Sarah Drinkwater. It's one of the first funds that the team at Allocator One had backed. And her thesis was okay, let's back tech companies where community is at the core of their value proposition and their moat. She didn't wake
Mm.
up one day with that thesis. She was one of the
Right.
first people at Google who had in her job description and in her job title the word community. She
Yeah.
built Google Maps as we know it today with millions of monthly active users for all of the review functions. She built that out and started to invest on the side in companies aligned to that thesis until eventually she launched a fund. And now she's winning awards as, breakout fund manager of the year in Europe. And the team at Allocator One was one of the first ones to write her a check because she didn't fit the traditional
Mm.
mold. And when you look at the research, it's very clear that it's usually the smaller funds, so
Oh, okay.
sub
Yeah. Hmm.
15, sub $50 million, that tend to return the greatest outcomes, because it's also difficult to return $1 billion
Right.
fund
Right.
because there's only so many companies out there that are going to have the valuations to justify that. So smaller niche funds is my contrarian take around where to look for uncorrelated alpha.
And when you wear your Accenture innovation hat
Mm-hmm.
as well, obviously your day role, like you, one of the themes is obviously how do you help important, but maybe and I put it in quotes, but like for from VC perspective, boring industries, but very, very important large companies, that are maybe not moving as fast, but they need help and innovation, right? So they could get help from startups, they could help from Accenture, but there's probably combination, like you were saying, like of this collaboration. Are you able to spot pockets of demand that is sort of this sort of like gives you an insight into where the alpha could be, just given your landscape of everything that you're seeing, and where there's all the entire huge industries that are left behind, and then uh very few people will go into it because it's not sexy, for the flavor of the day, and so the whole YC class is not going to be doing that version for that industry. Only few people that really love it. Is that kind of another dimension that you're
Mm-hmm.
able to spot?
Exactly, exactly. So, I mean, whenever I've invested in a startup, and if that
Mm,
startup is doing anything that's B2B lens oriented, I'm able to provide them with coaching around how
sure.
to do that B2B sales motion. I was once going through an interview for a board of directors role for a nonprofit, and the recruiter, when I spoke to him, was like, Iliana, I think you're going to be my secret weapon. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you can play this dual role on boards. You can be the adult in the room if it's,
Mm,
a smaller scale up type organization, or you could be the young disruptive innovator in the room,
mm.
depending on which org we're talking to here. And I thought that was such a beautiful encapsulation of my essence, because that is the role I play whenever I'm
Mm.
investing and advising in startups, or whenever I'm working with some of the corporates. Because you're right, VCs don't back everything, nor should they. Not every
Right.
business needs to be VC backable. Like, by
Right.
definition, it's a very small, small,
Yeah.
small sliver.
Great. So we're interviewing a playful adult is kind of the I like it. I think this I'll let my kids know that that's going to be something I'll aim for.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
well, what other words of wisdom would you have for people that are in the enterprise and want to kind of embody your openness to ideas and your playfulness, and being connected to innovation, and vice versa, ideas for founders or scale up leaders that want to work with the same organizations that you're serving at Accenture, kind of like one word of wisdom, one phrase of wisdom for each group.
So I think for the corporates, I would say think about innovation as a function. You have marketing as a function, you have technology as a function, but most organizations don't treat innovation in that way. And if I were to go
Mm,
ask a group of CEOs, hey, what was your innovation spend across R&D and some of the other initiatives that you have, and what was the ROI you got on that? They would look at me blankly and say, actually, I'm not sure. And so for organizations that are thinking about their relevance and how to reinvent themselves in this age of AI, I would really encourage you to think about, how do you treat innovation as a function? How do you build an innovation engine within
mm,
your organization to build up that muscle? It's what I do with our client organizations, with our teams all day, every day. And so happy to connect with organizations that are on that journey themselves as well. And my words of advice for the startups and the entrepreneurs is keep going, and
mm.
don't lose sight of what are the needs of your stakeholders that you're servicing. But at
Mm.
the same time, don't lose sight of where the world is going, and what are the new tools, what are the new products, what are the new ways of doing things. Because with AI, it's not just a bolt on technology that
No.
you add on at the end, it fundamentally transforms everything around how we as humans interact with it. And that advice is equally applicable if you are a 3-person startup or you're a 33,000 person organization.
So next year we do this interview with your avatar. Are
With
you
my
ready?
with my AI twin, Lila.
AI,
Oh, she's already
like,
ready.
she's ready.
She was at the Google Next conference a couple months ago, manning an entire booth by herself. I couldn't go. I was double booked somewhere else.
So we're
Lila's been
are we getting you or Lila? Tell us. Is there a question that we could ask? Tricky question.
So you're definitely getting the real me today, but next year maybe I'll be joined with a humanoid robot. Those are also really cool and moving quite quickly.
You heard it here. That would be a really fun one. We should do this. I had so
That's
much
great.
fun. Thank you so much, Iliana. Where can people find you and connect with you? You have a website.
So people can follow me on LinkedIn, and I also have a Substack where
Mhm.
I publish fairly regularly on things that are crossing my desk, everything from tech trends to capital investing trends to societal trends.
You've heard it here. The most innovative person in Accenture, all of North and South America, Iliana. Thank you so much for joining us. Lots of fun.